The Buffalo National River, America's first national river, and Arkansas, the natural state, can rightfully lay claim to it. Its beauty is unsurpassed. You see, this river remains the same as early explorers first saw it several hundred years ago. Come along with us and we'll show you why the Buffalo is first and foremost America's river. The Buffalo National River is 135 miles of pristine, protected paradise. Designated by Congress in 1972 as America's first national river, it's one of the few remaining pure, free-flowing streams which has not been significantly altered by industry or man in the lower 48 states. Many people played a role in saving this river. In the beginning, the late Dr. Neil Compton of Bentonville practically led a one-man crusade to keep it from being dammed up. Finally, it was Congressman John Paul Hammerschmidt of Harrison who introduced legislation to save the Buffalo as a free-flowing stream.
I had to try, after I decided that I wanted to leave the Buffalo a free-flowing stream, then I had to develop a political base for that was stronger than the opponents of that idea. I think it's been a great thing, and even today, people that were strongly opposed, now that they've been relocated and reestablished their lives, I think they too think it was probably a good thing.
We're blessed to have something like this. That's been a big part of my life since I was a little kid. I fished on it and learned how to canoe on it and learned all the different types of, hiking and nature, the wildlife, and I was pretty fortunate. I was a Boy Scout growing up, so I spent a lot of time around Camp Orr in the upper part of the river. We're in the middle section here. This is Skull Bluff. I've been fortunate to be here as long as I have. I really don't know what it'd be like to live without it, so it's hard for me to really tell you much of opinion because I've never had to live without something like this. I've been blessed, I would say that.
To really experience this river, you gotta float it, either by john boat, canoe, kayak, raft, or whatever. Just float it, because only then will you truly become a part of it. This particular day, upon the recommendation of our outfitter, we opted to get around in a john boat to cover more scenic miles in a shorter period of time.
This is the way to do it if you just want to sightsee and check everything out, just to get in a boat and run upstream when the river's good. By canoe, I think from Mount Hersey to Woolham, it's about 9 miles. It's a fair day. It's a long shuttle is what the biggest part is. It just takes a while to get from one access area to the next because they're so remote. Mm-hmm. But that's what makes it so pretty, is that it's the most remote part of Arkansas.
And if time really isn't of any great concern, you can do the full-blown river journey of 10 days or more.
We do get a few avid adventurers that like to go and do the whole river. Mm-hmm. We get a few a year, but we don't have as many as we used to get. It seems like most people are day floaters and hikers. A lot of people have started coming up to hike, and kayaking has gotten real popular too on the Buffalo. It seems that people can cover a lot more mileage in a kayak than they can in a canoe, so more people are more interested in trying to see more see as much of the river as they can at one point in time, so they like to come up and get in the kayaks and take a longer stroll and really enjoy the serenity, because you can get away from the crowd in a kayak, because you can do like such longer stretches that you can get what feels like the river almost to yourself.
Whatever you decide on, it's a wise choice to get with one of the river outfitters, especially if you've never been on the river before. Many of them grew up on this river like Ben Milburn and know it like the back of their hand.
I get asked a lot of questions about which part of the river is the most beautiful section of the river. And I have to tell everybody that there's not one section any prettier than the rest. It's all beautiful, you know. So it's tough to, you know, it's tough to say which is what's better than the next, because it's all pretty good. I've had guys from Louisiana come up, and they're used to muddy rivers, and they think the river's a lot shallower than it is. You know, I've seen them step off in 4 or 5 foot deep holes of water thinking that it's ankle deep, and go for a swim, that's pretty amusing when you see somebody do that. But everybody has about the same, you know, they all have about the same response, that they're amazed at how pretty the river is, and they all want to come back and see more of it, because you know, you can't ever get enough of it. I've lived here my entire life and still haven't got too much of it.
But the river is only the beginning of what the entire Buffalo National River area is all about. This river has provided for the livelihood of many previous generations, and the only way you can appreciate that aspect is to visit one of the restored homesteads along the Buffalo, such as the Collier homestead near the Tyler Bend Visitor Center in the middle portion. The Colliers came here from Kentucky during the early 1930s. Theirs was a subsistence farm, as many were back then. It was a hard living, but to them, a good living. Behind the homestead, a quarter-mile-long trail will lead you to 2 spectacular overlooks of the river. In the upper portion near Ponca, you can explore Lost Valley, which is more of a ravine or gorge. First photographed by a National Geographic photographer in 1945, this area became known after that as Lost Valley. This easy to moderate 1-mile hike will take you along towering cliffs and several waterfalls, with Eden Falls being the most impressive. There's also Cobb Cave, which is a large Native American bluff shelter. And at the end of the trail, there's another smaller cave you can explore with an underground waterfall. Just be sure and bring along at least 2 light sources. Also in the Ponca area along Boxley Valley, you can see all the Rocky Mountain elk that were brought into the state during the 1980s. Eastern elk were native to the Buffalo River area, but vanished by the 1840s and are now extinct. Probably the most rugged and difficult area to get through, and the most treacherous if you're not careful or prepared, is along Indian Creek Canyon south of Kyle's Landing. The 5-mile or so trail, if you can follow it, will take you into some of the most untouched wilderness in this section of the country, but it is recommended for experienced hikers only. There are waterfalls galore throughout this region, with unique rock formations such as the Eye of the Needle. Along the lower portion of the river, you can visit the old zinc mining town of Rush, or what's left of it. It now remains as the only ghost town in the nation that's protected by the federal government. For the most awesome and most spectacular scenery along the Buffalo, there are two areas in the upper portion of the river that are a must-see. First, Hemden Hollow Falls. At 220 feet, it's actually the tallest waterfall in mid-America between the Rockies and the Appalachians. There's a 2.5-mile trail that leads to it, very strenuous though, so the easiest would be to float the river and then take another trail from the river, which is only about a 30-minute hike. And finally, we come to the Goat Trail along 500-foot-tall Big Bluff. The scenery here will just literally take your breath away as you hike along a trail that goats did indeed use years ago from a nearby homestead. Taking in the sights here, you quickly begin to realize why it was so extremely important to save the Buffalo River region for future generations. It really is a treasure of America.
It is. It is. Everybody should come see it at least once. You know.
In the middle portion of the Buffalo National River, there are two rather interesting and unique bluffs. One is called the Narrows, or the Nars, as the locals call it, and the other is Skull Bluff. Got your interest? Well, let's go and explore them. Located west of St. Joe and Silver Hill in the middle portion of the Buffalo near the Woolham access, the Nars and Skull Bluff, you could say, are indeed the more unusual rock formations along this river.
Well, the Nars is a very gnar limestone outcrop that was created by the Buffalo River and Richland Creek. Richland Creek is on the south side, the Buffalo's on the north side, and they have been working together to carve out this really razor-thin limestone outcrop that we're standing on here. And not too long of geologic time, most likely the Buffalo, which is already undercutting this formation, will cut all the way through, and then we'll have what we call is a natural bridge. And the water will probably flow through there. And then when we come canoeing down the river, instead of going down the river over here, we'll cut through and be over here on this side. So if we live long enough, we'll be able to see that.
Geologic time, though, as Ed mentioned, meaning several 100,000 years, just in case you want to wait around to see any sort of natural bridge being formed here at the Nars. Other than an all-day float trip to get to this location, the other quicker way is by hiking in. For that, you'll have to cross the river at the Woolham access and continue on County Road number 14, or what's left of it, for 1.2 miles until you reach a slight pull-off area at the base of the Nars. Or you can hike directly to Skull Bluff past a gate through a vast grassy field down an old roadbed. Whichever way you choose to get here, by floating or hiking, the actual trek up the Nars is quite a bit tricky. It's like trying to walk on top of a huge fin. The secret is, don't look down. Instead, keep your eyes focused in front of you. Coming back down is even trickier. In some spots, maneuvering backwards may be the only way to be sure of your footing. Well, that was kind of interesting trek up there. Kind of gets tricky. Some spots it's only like a couple of feet wide. A half-mile downstream from the Nars is Skull Bluff, looking indeed like a half-submerged skull. Well, Vic, this is quite a unique formation here.
It is beautiful, isn't it? We're about 1.5 miles up from Woolham at this point.
I guess there's not too many folks that make as far as the float trip, because they have to start up here about 8 miles upriver.
Right. There's a trail on top of this that eventually goes over to the Nars. It's, you can walk up the back side of it. And of course, there's those caves up there that have the buzzards in them.
Be a good place for shelter if you run in a thunderstorm.
It would. Water comes around here pretty strong. Well, you saw there was trash 20 feet up the bank.
Yeah.
So when the water's up, it comes through here pretty heavy. I'll just back out. I don't believe we can get through that hole, do you?
Skull Bluff, which has also been referred to as the Bat House, is reputed to contain a large subterranean chamber reached by an underwater passage.
It's a nice swimming hole right here too. Really nice spot to the beach and all over there. And, you know, this part of the Buffalo has its own beauty.
One of the premier hiking trails in the state happens to be along 500-foot-tall Big Bluff in the upper portion of the Buffalo. Simply called the Goat Trail, what you'll experience here is some of the most spectacular scenery in the country. To reach the Goat Trail, you first have to start at the Center Point trailhead north of Ponca. After a 2.7-mile hike, you'll then veer off to the right onto a smaller trail, which will take you to Big Bluff. The views from Big Bluff overlooking the Buffalo National River are just absolutely stunning. Joining us on the hike is Rick Davidson with the Buffalo Outdoor Center in Tonka. Well, Rick, you're one of the fortunate ones that you actually grew up in these parts of the country.
Yes, sir, I did, and love every bit of it. Living here in the Ozarks, the way I get to live here is actually a reward. A lot of people take for granted that it's lived here for many years. But as I grew up here and then moved away, came back after many years, I realized really what I had left. The river here itself has got a lot of history in itself, and again, just being able to live in these Ozark Mountains is actually a reward. Every day when I wake up in the morning, the sun rising over the mountains is unbelievable and hard to beat. So yes, I enjoy exactly where I live.
Now you were telling me like hiking along the goat trail, you're finally kind of realizing where you lived.
Yes, definitely. Again, the goat trail, to a lot of people travel from many miles from around states wide actually to come here and to look at the goat trail and to be able to walk up on it and to be able to get up here is actually like a kid reminiscing of playing. This is a big playground for me. So again, being here is a reward actually, and really love it.
Well, I guess at one time goats did actually go across this trail.
Yes, there was an old guy, his name was William Parker. In the old days, he ran goats over in this area, and they would come along this trail, and that's how it got its name, was William Parker. And surrounding people that actually knew William said that this was going to be called the goat trail because of his goats that would come out on this point and walk along the edge of the bluff. So that's how the goat trail actually got its name. Or Big Bluff. It's got the two different names because a lot of people call it Big Bluff because of the 500-foot on the incline of it. So yeah, this is named the Goat Trail because of William mainly. So William Parker was one of the guys that ran the goats in this area.
I guess you have a lot of people, those that come to the Buffalo Outdoor Center to float the river, and those that come here for the hiking opportunities.
Yeah, there is some people that'll get on the river and they actually will take a 10-day canoe trip or a 10-day hiking trip. So, the best trips actually though aren't necessarily in miles and distance. It's actually being able to cover a short distance and be able to explore and look at things like this that a lot of people will miss because they're in a hurry to cover the miles.
Yeah. Along with the breathtaking views, you'll also encounter some unusual cypress trees on the face cliffs, which are estimated to be centuries old.
The trees they grow, if you'll notice, they're really twisted. They are centuries old. How many centuries is all up to the scientists, we don't really know, but they actually take a long time because of the amount of water and dirt that they have for nutrition is very little. So therefore, it takes a long time for a tree this size to be able to grow in height and be able to really even make it where the tree is not going to die off and actually fall off. If you look a little bit lower, you can actually see that part of it is dying off, and it's because it doesn't have as much nutrition. So yes, it's kind of amazing to know that a tree that size would be able to grow out of a small crevice. And that in itself is an amazing story.
And it's an amazing hike along this, the popular Goat Trail on Big Bluff in the upper portion of the Buffalo National River. So you owe it to yourself to explore what many states only wish they had, a national river. Don't pass up an opportunity to experience an incredible journey on one of the last remaining frontier rivers, the Buffalo, America's first national river.